Imagine waking up one morning to discover that everything you've worked for, every dollar you've saved, every investment you've made has vanished overnight. Your bank account is empty, your job is gone, the future you planned no longer exists. This isn't fiction. This has happened over and over throughout history, and it will happen again. The question isn't if another economic collapse is coming, the question is when and whether you'll be ready when it does. Today, we're diving into the 5 most catastrophic financial meltdowns in modern history, moments when the world's economy didn't just stumble, it fell off a cliff. And by understanding what destroyed millions of lives in the past, you might just save your own future. October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday, the day the American dream died. Picture Wall Street on that crisp autumn morning. Men in expensive suits, confident investors who had built fortunes seemingly overnight, suddenly stood frozen in horror. The stock market, which had climbed higher and higher for years, was now in absolute free fall. Every second, another fortune disappeared. Every minute, another life was ruined. The trading floor descended into pure chaos. Grown men shouted themselves hoarse. Papers flew through the air. Panic spread like a disease. This wasn't just a bad trading day. This was the beginning of the Great Depression, the worst economic catastrophe the modern world has ever seen. And the terrifying part? Almost nobody saw it coming. For nearly a decade before that fateful October day, America had been living in what felt like paradise. The Roaring '20s brought prosperity, jazz, optimism, and most importantly, a stock market that seemed to defy gravity. Everyone wanted a piece of the action. It wasn't just the wealthy elite anymore. Ordinary Americans, factory workers, teachers, shopkeepers, they all poured their life savings into stocks. The prevailing wisdom was simple and seductive. Stocks only go up. Buy now, get rich later. It seemed foolproof, but underneath this glittering surface, the foundation was rotting. The entire system was built on speculation and reckless optimism. Banks, desperate for profits, handed out loans to anyone who asked, even people with no ability to repay. Investors borrowed massive sums to buy even more stocks, a practice called buying on margin. The stock market had become a house of cards built on borrowed money and blind faith. And when confidence finally cracked, everything collapsed. The domino effect was brutal and swift. As stock prices plummeted, banks that had invested heavily in the market began to fail one after another. Families who had entrusted their entire life savings to these institutions rushed to withdraw their money, only to find locked doors and empty vaults. Their money was simply gone. Businesses across the country crumbled as credit dried up and customers disappeared. Jobs vanished at a terrifying pace. Unemployment soared to an unthinkable 25%. 1 in 4 Americans couldn't find work. Bread lines stretched for entire city blocks, filled with once prosperous citizens now desperate for a meal. In rural America, the nightmare took a different form. Farmers lost their land to ruthless foreclosures, unable to pay debts on crops that no longer had buyers. Then came the Dust Bowl, when years of poor farming practices combined with devastating drought turned fertile farmland into barren, lifeless desert. Families abandoned everything they knew, becoming refugees in their own country. The pain didn't stop at America's borders. The Great Depression spread across the globe like a contagion, destroying economies from London to Tokyo. International trade collapsed as desperate nations raised tariffs high sky, trying to protect their own industries. But these protectionist measures only made everything worse, choking off the flow of goods and capital that might have helped recovery. For over a decade, governments tried everything they could think of to fix the catastrophe. President Franklin Roosevelt launched the New Deal, an ambitious series of programs that put millions to work building roads, bridges, and dams while creating safety nets like Social Security. These programs provided relief and hope, but recovery remained painfully slow.
Ironically, it wasn't brilliant economic policy that finally ended the Great Depression. It was World War II. The massive industrial mobilization for war created jobs, stimulated production, and restored economic stability, though at an unimaginable human cost. Fast forward to October 1973. A different kind of weapon brought the world's most powerful economies to their knees. This time, the threat wasn't financial speculation or bank failures. It was oil. The Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries imposed an embargo on nations supporting Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Almost overnight, they turned off the taps. The impact was immediate and devastating. Oil prices didn't just increase, they exploded, quadrupling from $3 per barrel to nearly $12 in a matter of months. For countries that had built their entire economies on cheap, abundant Middle Eastern oil, this was nothing short of catastrophic. Gas stations across America became war zones. Cars lined up for blocks, sometimes for hours, just for a chance to fill their tanks. Many stations simply ran out of gas entirely. Others imposed strict rationing. A simple trip to work or the grocery store suddenly required careful planning and calculation. But the crisis went deeper than inconvenient gas lines. When energy prices quadruple, everything becomes more expensive. Food costs soared because farming and transportation depend on fuel. Manufacturing costs exploded. Heating homes became a luxury many couldn't afford. Businesses watching their operating costs skyrocketing had no choice but to cut back. They reduced production, slashed payroll, and eliminated jobs. Unemployment climbed to an unthinkable 25%. 1 in 4 Americans couldn't find work. Bread lines stretched for entire city blocks, filled with once prosperous citizens now desperate for a meal. In rural America, the nightmare took a different form. Farmers lost their land to ruthless foreclosures, unable to pay debts on crops that no longer had buyers. Then came the Dust Bowl, when years of poor farming practices combined with devastating drought turned fertile farmland into barren, lifeless desert. Families abandoned everything they knew, becoming refugees in their own country. Fast forward to 2008, and the world learned that the financial system had learned nothing from history. It started with something that sounds wholesome and American: home ownership for everyone. In the early 2000s, banks and mortgage lenders decided to make the American dream accessible to anyone who wanted it, regardless of their ability to actually pay for it. They handed out mortgages like candy, even to people with terrible credit, unstable income, or no down payment. These were called subprime loans, and they were ticking bombs. As more people bought homes, prices climbed higher and higher, and Wall Street, always looking for the next big profit opportunity, saw gold. Banks packaged these risky subprime mortgages together into complex financial instruments with impressive names like mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations. They sold these bundles to investors worldwide. And here's the kicker: credit rating agencies stamped them with AAA ratings, the highest possible grade, suggesting they were as safe as government bonds. Either they didn't understand what they were rating, or they didn't care. Either way, investors bought them up eagerly.
For several years, everyone made money and convinced themselves the party would never end. Investors collected profits, banks raked in fees. Homeowners watched their property values climb and felt wealthy. But in 2006, reality began to intrude. Housing prices peaked and then started falling. Suddenly, millions of homeowners found themselves underwater, owing more on their mortgages than their homes were actually worth. When mortgage payments reset to higher rates, as many subprime loans were designed to do, defaults surged. Then 2008 arrived, and the house of cards collapsed spectacularly. Lehman Brothers, one of the largest and oldest investment banks in America, went bankrupt virtually overnight. The shock reverberated around the planet. The entire global financial system, which turned out to be built on bad debt and reckless speculation, simply froze. Banks stopped trusting each other and stopped lending. Stock markets around the world went into free fall. Trillions of dollars of wealth evaporated. Governments and central banks responded with overwhelming force. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates to zero and launched massive stimulus programs. Congress passed the CARES Act, pumping over $2 trillion into the economy through direct payments to citizens, enhanced unemployment benefits, and business support. Similar measures rolled out worldwide. And then something remarkable happened. By April, news of potential vaccines and the rapid rise of the stay-at-home economy, powered by companies like Amazon, Zoom, and Netflix, sparked optimism. Markets began climbing at a record pace. By August, the S&P 500 had completely erased its losses, making it the shortest bear market in history. But this recovery revealed a troubling reality. Wall Street bounced back, while Main Street continued to suffer. Small businesses collapsed by the thousands. Unemployment remained high. Essential workers risked their lives for low wages, while stock portfolios soared. The disconnect between financial markets and the real economy had never been more obvious or more disturbing. Here's what history teaches us. Economic crashes are inevitable. They happen faster than anyone expects. Recovery takes longer than anyone wants, and the lessons learned are forgotten far too quickly. We've seen speculation destroy the economy in 1929. We've seen energy dependence cripple nations in 1973. We've seen reckless financial engineering nearly collapse the global system in 2008. We've seen how fast fear can spread and how fragile everything really is in 2020. The patterns repeat because human nature doesn't change. Greed, fear, overconfidence, and short-term thinking drive the cycles. So what comes next? What will trigger the next collapse? Nobody knows for certain, but the seeds are always being planted. Are you prepared? Understanding the past isn't just about learning history, it's about protecting your future. Because the next crisis is coming, and this time, you'll see it before it destroys you.